Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp with a Limp, and I am back with some more The Fate of All. I do apologize. I know it's been a while since I've had this back onto the table. Unfortunately, I just had a whole lot of projects that popped up that were all time sensitive and all had to be done by a certain time before a Kickstarter release, so it held me up for a little while. But I finally got a chance to get this going again. We're going to pick up where we left off. So I did the review, did the previous video where we went over an example of play and we were showing how units moved. Because I'm trying to hit some of those more obscure facts, movement, the supply checks. Supply checks are a big deal in this game. And we moved Persephone, what's his name? Parmenion, over with his whole stack of units over here and showed how he got some supply and did all that good stuff. Now, I went ahead and I moved around the units a little bit because I wanted to show an example of land combat and how that's going to work. Now, I don't have the scenario set up that they do. If I did have that scenario, the campaign set up, I would go with that. That would be easier. But I set mine up so it's similar to the example of play that is in the book. That way you guys can kind of see where I'm getting some of this information. Go to land combat in this very excellent little book if you want to kind of follow along with what we're doing. Like I said, I did mine different. That way you can see exactly how the numbers are reached, right? So it's not exactly as it is in the book, but that way you guys can kind of follow along and understand where I'm coming from and getting these numbers. So like I said, I got Parmenion here, and he's breaking away with a small group. The main army is staying back over here near the supply port. We'll probably do a siege over here or over here later on. But he has a couple of units of hoplites, and he's got a couple of units of light cav with him. And bring too many. Oh, let's see. Yeah, I grabbed one too many. Oh, no, I got skirmishers too. That's right. I grabbed him one thing of skirmishers. So he's got a couple of units of light cav. He's got a thing of skirmishers and a couple of units of some heavier infantry that he is going to move along with. So that's his little stack of units there right here in this hex. I just moved them off so it's easier to see. Actually, let's just move this army counter out of the way for the moment, and we'll put these guys here. So they're right there, and they are wanting to go over here, and they're wanting to try to catch this leader with some light infantry out. But Memnon over here has some cavalry with him, and he wants to reinforce these guys. He wants to try to back them up a little bit. That way the Persians aren't caught with just one single counter that's going to get wiped out. So when we're doing that, the move, fight, die phase, the whole nine, right? That's what we're focused on here. We're not doing the whole turn, just focusing on that piece. Parmenion, go marching along, get over here. Thing of it is, you can do reaction moves, and reaction moves in this game are not just I'm going to jump and I'm going to attack you, right? It can be I'm going to move and I'm going to reinforce where you're going. So you don't have to move like in a reaction to attack someone, but you can move to reinforce other units that are going to get attacked. So you know this guy's coming this way and he's going to get stuck in over here. Well, all right, we're going to jump in there and back him up a little bit. Thing of it is you do have some requirements for a unit to be able to do a reaction move. They obviously can't be disrupted. They can't have already reacted in a previous movement, right? They have to be within the reaction zone, which is going to be within 4 hexes of the unit that is doing the reacting. So you can count 4 hexes out, but it has to be 4 hexes that you could actually cross. So you can't like cross the sea and count that, right? Because that's terrain he can't normally move on, right? But down over here, you know, it's open. He could count 4 hexes down this way and react into that direction. Now, this is interesting. The distance between the two forces has not increased. It has to be decreasing. So, and they show an example of this, which I like the fact that they touched on this, is that you can make reaction checks each time they're moving into a new hex, but that new hex has to be closer. That new hex can't be farther away. So if they're already close to you and you make a reaction and then you fail and they move farther away, you can't try to react to them again, because now they're retreating, or not retreating, but they're moving away from you, and you missed them when they were at their closest. So you don't get to continue trying to react to them as they're moving away. They have to be closing that distance for you to keep making those reaction checks against them. Obviously can't be retreating or routing. So that's like combat, right? Or retreat before combat. You can't react to someone who's retreating in something else. And they can't be moving into a hex to initiate lane combat. So what I mean by that is, we know Parmenion here. I keep wanting to call him Persephone. Parmenion is moving along over here and he wants to get to this hex, okay? And do his attack. Here's the thing. Memnon can react in this hex, or not in this hex, but when Parmenion moves to this hex, and he can react when he moves to this hex. But when he's moving in here to do his attack, now he can't react anymore. It's like, no, you had your chance. We're initiating the land combat. You missed your opportunity. You didn't join forces before the land combat took place. So when it comes to reaction, and this is something that took me a sec to figure out, because I was like, where the hell are they getting the numbers? Right here on the reaction table, this is below the movement table, right? So we got movement and terrain effects. So right here at the bottom is the reaction table. And these are just the modifiers. But if you look at this line right here, reaction move on a roll of 8+ modified as followed. That roll of 8+ is only mentioned here. It is not mentioned in the rule book. And I kept going, where the hell are they getting the number 8? Where's it coming from? And it's coming from the player aid. I think that this little, hey, it's 8 naturally modified as below. Should have been in the rule book proper, because I kept missing that that top line. I'm like, what are you modifying? Where's the number coming from? But yes, it's going to be 8 for everything, modified as below. You're going to add your commander rating, and this is roll on a D10. Obviously, you're going to roll a D10 and try to hit 8 or better. You get to add your commander rating, and let me grab up Memnon here. So we see Memnon, he's got some numbers on him. We're concerned with that little 3 right there, although he's 3 all the way across the board. But that 3 is his strategic rating. That is the number that you are going to be using to do your modifier. So he gets to add 3. And then you're going to subtract the distance in hexes. So the most it'll be will be a -4 if he's at max range. And then -3, -2, -1 as they move closer. So here we see that would be 1, 2, 3 hexes away. Okay. So when he moves to this hex, it's -3. Moves to this hex, it's a -2. You get to add, if you have 8 light cavalry points or higher, you get to add a +1. And if it's in winter, we know we're not in winter right now, so that's not going to matter for us. So our total rating, right, for him, he's getting to add a 3, and then he's subtracting a 3 for a distance of 3. So when he moves here, all right, Parmenion goes there with his little forces. It's +3, -3, which means it's just looking for 8 or better. We got a 7. Oh, we fail. All right. When he goes to here, then he's adding 3 and subtracting 2. So it's actually a +1. This would have succeeded on that. So he rolls again. Got a 6. He got a 7 twice. You loser. But for our purposes, we're gonna say he succeeded on that one, because I need to bump up these forces a little bit. But if you succeed on your roll, you do get to make your reaction move, which for Memnon, he can go here. Now, think about the reaction move is you have one of 2 choices on your movement points. It's either 15 or whatever number this unit has moved, whichever is the lowest. They have moved 4 movement points, 3 for the woods, 1 for the meadow. So 4 movement points is what Memnon could spend in that little example, which he could do because that is 2.5 for him to get there, because he is going into the meadow, which is 1, and then plus 1.5 for the crossing of the little river there. It's a minor river, not a major river, so he does get to go to the... Now we're looking at combat proper. So we're moving forward with Parmenion. He is going into this hex here with his forces, and he's going to attempt to attack Memnon and his guys there. Right off the bat, you get a retreat before combat. You can decide to leave. The defenders can, rather. And in this case, they're going to choose not to because I want to have a combat go on, but they probably wouldn't really want to take this battle because they're outnumbered pretty much 2-1. But they could flee if they want to. That's the first thing that you have to do, is the retreat before combat. But then you have a reveal the army forces, because remember, usually you're just going to have your little army counter. So your opponent's not necessarily going to know what forces you have. They might have an idea, but if they haven't done any reconnaissance, they might think this is a smaller force than it is. So you reveal those forces, and then there's a chance for a retreat after finding that out. You can try to retreat during combat, but in that case, that's going to be a lot more dangerous for the defenders who are trying to flee during the combat. There's a much higher chance they're going to take casualties or be stuck into the combat. Before that, though, you do have to check for an overrun. For us, we are not going to have an overrun here because they do not have anywhere near 7-1 odds. 7-1 would be an overrun. That's not going to apply here. Since there is no overrun, that is when Parmenion would officially spend his 3 movement points to initiate the combat. And there is one further supply check. Watch my previous video if you haven't. I go in depth into supply checks. But we know for a force this small with foraging values this high with supply over here that there's no chance of him failing that supply check. So he's good. But you would perform a supply check before the combat initiates. Now, you will have to assign leaders for each faction. We are not going to have a choice here for the Macedonians. They will have Parmenion with his little stats there. If your faction leader is part of the combat, he has to be chosen, right? He has to get stuck in. Memnon has the best stats for the Persians, so he will be their faction leader. But again, remember, if your faction leaders there, right? So if Alexander were here, he would be leading the Macedonians. Wouldn't even be a choice. Now, here's where we actually start to get a little squirrely. This is where the rules start to tweak around in my mind here. We get into the route values. And it took me a little bit to grasp what this means. But basically what the route value is how many points of size, how many size points of your forces can you lose before your force will retreat automatically, right? You've taken too many damages. You got to go. There are numbers in your scenario booklet that will tell you what your route values are. So we can see in this little scenario that I have set up, the Persians have a route level of 25. And the Macedonians have a route level of 30. That can be adjusted if faction leaders are involved, but for us, they're not involved, so that's not going to hurt us one way or the other. For the Persians, it's going to be relatively easy. We'll set that leader out of the way. What do we got? We have a total, I think, just of 6. We're doing a small one here. So we have 6 size points. We got 2 of light infantry, and we've got 4 of light cavalry. Now, normally you're going to have a lot more people involved. I'm just doing small numbers for ease, although I think it'd be easier to have bigger numbers for the calculation. But 25. So you're going to multiply whatever your size value is by that number, like point that number. So 0.25, or in essence, 1/4. So that gives us a route value. God, I really should have put more people on here. Actually, let me grab some because we are too low. We're going to double this. We're going to double this because my route values are way too low. We're going to add twice the thing. So 2 cavalry and 2 light infantry here, okay, to give myself some bigger numbers, because that actually gives me a route value of 3. Total forces are 12. 25% of those is 3. So once we have that number, when that number of size points is lost is when they are going to start routing. And that is going to be rounded down. So if you had like 3.5, you just round it down to 3. All right, and I'm actually having to add a couple more over here again because the number was smaller than I thought it was. I thought these light cavalry had 4 size points. Let me get them on there. They only got 1. Those are tiny little, just recon light cavalry. Barely any of them there. They are not like the Persians that have 4 on theirs. So a total of 11 size points here for our Macedonians. If I can get them all stacked up. Here we go. And a couple of infantry over to those guys. So now they got 11 times 0.3 because they have a route level of 30 gives us 3.3. So we drop the 0.3 and we get a 3. So they both are going to have a route level of 3 for this combat. Sorry about the little goof there. I think I had looked at the Persian numbers and confused that for the Macedonian numbers when I was running this off camera, but that's all right. I added a couple extra infantry. We'll make do with it, but we've got 11 size points total versus 12 size points total, both of them with a route level of 3. All right, so once you've gotten to this point, you're pretty much in the home stretch. You're at the easy part when it comes to the combat. That prep, everything we were doing before, figuring out the route levels and whether or not you got over on all that, that's the difficult part of it. Now, we just got to do what we do in all our war games, figure out our combat values, and then look at the land combat table to compare the ratio. So for our Persians, we've got a total value of 10. They've got a couple of units with a value of 3, a couple of units with a value of 2, total of 10. The Macedonians actually have a lot better values. Their total combat value is 19. Now remember, there are other values on these counters. You're not going to be looking everywhere. You're only going to look at that little red number right next to what they are. Those other numbers are if you're going to be using like the tactical battle map. This just land combat is going to be just that red number. So when it comes to that land combat, it's going to continue until either someone routes or someone chooses to retreat or one side is just wiped completely off the map. So you can have multiple combat rounds go on. You're not going to have just one. You can just have one if one side chooses to retreat afterwards. In this, the battle likely it would end fairly quickly since the route value is such a low number. Those type of losses would add up quickly and cause one side to rout. But in your bigger conflicts that you're going to see in this game, it's going to kind of flow back and forth, and then you'll have one side that says, you know what, I've taken enough of a beating, I'm going to bounce. Now, when you do your combat, you're going to look at your little table here, land combat and friendly to enemy combat ratio, right? So this is the numbers I'm talking about, and they're going to be the modifiers down here on what's going to affect that. So with the numbers that we have, unfortunately, the Macedonians are 1 away from having 2 to 1. That would have been great for them. So they would be on the 3 to 2 column. But when the Persians were attacking back, because you're going to figure these numbers in both directions. You're not going to just roll on the 3 to 2 combat table just for combat. The 3 to 2 table is going to be for the Macedonians because right now they're 19 to 10. But since they're 19 to 10, that's going to be a 1 to 2 for the Persians. So the Persians will use this table with any applicable modifiers, and the Macedonians will use 3 to 2 with any applicable modifiers. And your modifiers are going to depend upon the composition of your forces. One of the easy ones, you've got your commanders table. That is down over here. And that just has to do with the difference in the combat rating of your commanders or your strategic rating, which again is that little 3 number. Both of them are a 3, so there is no difference. But say Alexander was there and his rating's a 5. There would be a difference of 2 between him and Memnon. So you would look at the commander's table and like, okay, what's the difference? For Alexander, he's a +2. That's his difference from him and the enemy commander, which gains him another +1 bonus. For Memnon, in that specific situation, he would be at a -2 compared to his opponent, and he would be a -1 modifier for his combat. Now, for us, there is no difference, so nothing that is going to be applied here. And for the rest of your modifiers, you're just going to apply all that fit. But keep in mind, though, that when you start to apply these modifiers, that also counts towards the hits that you have to take. So if you apply things like heavy cavalry or cavalry modifier bonuses, +1 down here, then your cavalry has to take some of those losses when you calculate the hits at the end of the combat. And then obviously besides that, you'll have things like defending behind a river or major river or a basic river, giving basic modifiers like +1 or +2. But like I said, keep in mind, and they show this quite nicely in this little book. God, I love this little book. It has such good examples in it, but they go over all the different combat rounds in here. When you are conducting your combat, you're going to figure these numbers after each one of those combats, right? So if you take losses, you're going to calculate for those losses if there's a combat round 2. And then if you take more losses in combat round 2, you're going to figure that for combat round 3. That's going to slowly reduce the amount of forces that you have. Like I said, here though, with a route value of 3, any losses would very quickly cause that route value to be hit. And like I said previously, you would just continue on until one side either routes, one side chooses to retreat, or one side decides we're going to fight to the last man, and they're wiped out completely.